In HTML, we have two types of elements. So far we've seen different types of elements, right? Like H1, we've seen how to create H1 elements, the P elements. But each of these elements, they belong to either a block level element or an inline level element, because these are the two types of elements we have in HTML. So HTML uses various elements to structure and present content on web pages. Elements are categorized into block level and inline level based on their default display behavior. All right. So a block level element starts on a new line and occupy the full width available. And then we have different we have examples of block level elements. We have the div, which I think we've not used. Don't worry. We have the div, we have the P for paragraph, the H1 to H6 for headings, the UL, we just use the UL, we have the OL, we have the LI, we have the table elements, we have the form elements, we have the header, footer, section. These are some of these HTML5 semantics elements, though. All right, and all these are some of the examples of a block level element. But remember, a block level element starts on a new line and occupy the full width available. Then on the other hand, we have the inline level elements, which do not start on a new line and only occupy as much width as necessary. And a good example is span, the anchor tag, right? In our last session, we saw the anchor tag for creating links, right? So a link or the A tag is a good example of an inline level element. And we can remember when we created our links, right? They were all rendered on the same line until when we use the BR tag to format it. All right, and then we have the strong. The strong is also a good example of an inline level element. The EM for making text to be an italic form is another example of inline level elements. And then we have the IMG. If you have done the assignment 2, I'm very sure you must have noticed this. All your images, they are rendered on the same line. They do not start on a new line. And then we have the BR to break a line, to break a content to a new line. And then we have the input elements, label elements, the small elements, code elements, and of course we have the site and the time elements. We have a good number of them, but these are some of the few examples of the block level elements and the inline level elements. So let's see how we can make use of this in our code. So maybe I should just create it inside the list. I will say element type and type.html. Element type.html. So block and inline. So because these are the two types of HTML element that we have. So first, let's take a look at the block level elements. Block level elements. So we mentioned that H1 is a good example of block level elements, and I'm going to prove that shortly. So let's say this is my web page, just to get some content on the page. So this is my web page, and I'm going to run it. I'm going to run the element type HTML document. Okay, good. This is my web page, and we mentioned that a block level element starts on a new line, right? Block level element starts on a new line and occupy the full width available. The full width here implies the width of its parent element. So for instance, now we are actually focusing on this H1, right, as the block level element. This means that the full width of this H1 element is going to be the full width of its parent element. So can someone tell me the parent element of H1 element in this case?
Body.
Thank you. Body, that's correct. So body is the parent element of H1 element, right? Even from the indentation, you can actually tell what a parent element is and what a child element is, and what are the siblings elements. Now look at the head element here, right? The head element has one, two, three direct child elements. This first meta tag, the second meta tag, and of course the title element, right? And then we can consider these three elements as siblings. So you can say this meta tag, and this title tag are siblings, and their parent is the head element. Similarly, we have HTML. HTML is an element here, and then it has two direct child elements. So can someone tell me the direct child elements of HTML?
Language.
No.
Head and body.
Direct child elements, please. Direct child elements. I didn't say attributes. The lang here is an attribute
Are you child of element of what?
of HTML elements.
Direct
The head and the
of
body.
what?
The
Of
head and the
HCM
body.
element.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
The head
Yes,
and
that's
the
correct.
body.
Yes, the head and the
Yes.
body is the correct
Yeah.
answer. The head and the body, they are the direct child elements. All right.
Okay.
So just as I have mentioned, the indentation makes it more easier for us to identify the parent-child relationship. Please, this is very, very, very important, especially if you start writing your CSS. Because if you're writing your CSS, that is when you start creating, different section. And if you don't understand where a particular section starts and where it ends, you might not really be able to, or you might have issues with your styling or with your CSS in general. But I mean, I believe by now, if you can understand how to identify the parent-child relationship, I mean, we are good to go with your CSS. All right, so that's that. So I mentioned that H1 is a good example of a block level element, right? And to prove that, right, I'm going to introduce the inline CSS. Again, please, you don't need to worry too much if you don't understand what's going on here. I just want to create a background color. So I'm going to set the background color to maybe yellow, orange. So I'm going to save. So it will set the background color to orange. H1, background color to orange. Then I'm going to refresh and boom. So you can see. So we mentioned that block level elements, they what? They occupy the full width available. And I said the full width in this case is the width of its parent element. So we believe that body is a block level element. So which means it takes the entire width of our device. So which means the width of the body element in this case is whatever width of my laptop, because right now I am running this code from my laptop. So the width is from here to the extreme end, from the start to the very end of my device. All right. So this means that if I tamper with the width of the body element, right, it's going to affect the length. The length or the width of the H1 as well. So if I give this style and then set the width to, let's say, 50%. So I'm going to set this to percentage. So it should give me half of my screen. So 50% save. So I'm going to see. So you can see the H1 we also adjust to fit in the full width of its parent element. So now that we have set the width of the body element, which happens to be the parent element of H1, to 50%, that is half of the full width of our device, right? The H1 as well, we go by the rule, or we follow, or we occupy the full width of its parent element. So that is how it works. Please, do we understand? But the idea is for us to
Yes,
know
sir.
that block level element always starts on a new line and they occupy the full width available. So I'm going to get rid of this style. I don't want 50%. Save, refresh, and then to take back the full width. All right. So that's that for block level element. So any element that starts on a new line, just know that it is a block level element. Now for inline level elements, okay, we have P. P also is a block level element. So this is a paragraph. This is a paragraph. Paragraph. Save. Refresh. So good. You see, it starts on a new line. If I create another paragraph, let's say another paragraph and say another paragraph. Save. Refresh. You see, I mean, we still have space. So after the end of the first paragraph, right, there are still space. Look at why space here. So someone would have actually asked that why can't this other paragraph be rendered side by side to the first paragraph? And that's because paragraph is a block level element, which means they will always start on a new line and occupy the full width available. So that is why you see this first paragraph and the second paragraph are rendered on a different line. So I believe block level element is cleared by now. So let's move on to inline. Inline level element. So from this slide, we mentioned that inline level elements, they do not start on a new line and only occupy as much width as necessary, right? And examples of inline level elements are, we have the span, A tag, strong, EM, IMG, that's for image, we have the BR input,
Yes,
and
sir.
so on and so forth. Yeah, let's look at the span element. So we have the span. So I'm going to say that is span one, span two. Let me get some real content here. This is span. This is span element. Another span element. Let me get another one again. The yet another span element. So I'm going to save this, and now look at the difference between the PH1 and of course the span element. So let's refresh to see the results. So what do you notice? The three span elements are rendered on the same line, side by side. So this is span element, another span element, yet another span element. So to really make sense out of this, I'm going to change their background color. So I will give this first one a background of maybe red. So quickly I will copy this line, this attribute style, copy, dump it right here, and then change this to gold. And then something is wrong. Okay, I didn't close the quotes. And then similarly, I'm going to dump this right here, close the quotes, and then change the color, background color to um, green. Save. Then I'm going to refresh. So you can see the first one, red, gold, and green, right? First one with the content of this is span element, another span element, and yet another span element. Now let's look at the definition again. Inline level element do not start on a new line and
Master,
only
please, I don't
occupy.
understand that side.
You did not what?
Understand that side.
Which side? Which side?
The one you just explained, the background.
Inline level. Oh, yeah. Just as I mentioned, don't worry much at this point. What I just did there is to set the background color of this element. So I did this to explain the difference between block level elements and inline level elements. So there is a proper session for CSS. Don't worry, this style is from CSS session, right? So, but just know that this style is to change the background color of a particular element. It is an attribute for certain CSS properties. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
But just yeah, welcome. So just focus on the block level elements and inline level elements at this point. And so let's try to understand it first, and then hopefully when we get to CSS, we're going to talk more on the style attributes. All right. So again, let's take a look at the definition. Inline level elements do not start on a new line and only occupy as much width as necessary. So which means they take the exact width of their content. In the first session, I mentioned that an element is a combination of opening tag, a closing tag, and the content, right? An element is a combination of the opening tag, the closing tag, and what? The content. So the content here is what? This is span element. This is span element. Good. Now, and I said what? An inline level element, they take the exact width of their content. So it makes sense now if I head back to the page. The exact width of this content is obviously where the background color occupies, right? The first one, red color, red background. Second one, gold background, and then third one is green background. So
Yes.
if I create another inline level element, right, as long as there is the space remaining at this line can fit in that content, then it will be rendered right there. Except if the space is not enough for that content, then it will break to the next line and then continue like that. So inline label elements, they do not start on any line and they take the exact width of their content. But block label elements, they start on a new line and take the full width of their parent element.